Are the Baltimore Ravens about to get Lamar Jackson some wide receiver help? Of course, assuming he does stay in Baltimore. We talk about the latest reports on a free agent star wide receiver. We'll look at what the teams across the NFL have had to say about Lamar Jackson and potentially pursuing the former MVP quarterback. We'll also look at how the Ravens got here and how they could move forward in more scenarios and more situations. All coming up next here on this episode of Locked On Ravens.
You are Locked On Ravens, your daily Baltimore Ravens podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome in to another episode of Locked On Ravens, your daily Baltimore Ravens podcast. I'm your host here with you as always, Kevin Ostreicher of Ravens Wire, and we're here as always on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thank you so much for being here with us today on this midweek edition episode here on Wednesday, almost April. Tuning in here, making us your first listen each and every day. Free and available everywhere you get your podcasts. You can subscribe for free in video form on YouTube, audio form, wherever you get your podcast. We are 5 days a week, so Monday through Friday, we put out daily Ravens content. So any Ravens news, analysis, Lamar Jackson updates. We're locked on Lamar Jackson here. I appreciate all the support and everything. So if you have a friend that wants daily Ravens content, be sure to throw them our way. I strive here to put out the best daily Ravens content each and every day, Monday through Friday, 6 a.m. Eastern time. And we're back here, a midweek edition episode where we're going to be talking about some potential wide receiver help coming to Baltimore and potentially helping Lamar Jackson. Obviously, this is assuming he stays. With the big news of Monday was the fact that Lamar Jackson revealed that he did request a trade from the Ravens on March 2nd, so about 3 weeks ago. But potentially a wide receiver, a star wideout, could be coming to Baltimore. So we'll talk about the reports that came out, how likely it is that this player is going to come to Baltimore, and a lot more in the first segment, and how that maybe could persuade Lamar Jackson to potentially come back to Baltimore. In the second segment, we're going to look about just what these teams have had to say about Lamar over the past 24, 48 hours. Teams that you would assume would be interested, but maybe are or maybe aren't interested in what their stances are on potentially pursuing Lamar. So we'll talk about that in the second segment and why it makes sense, why it doesn't. Then in the final segment, we'll kind of take a look back on just what these past few weeks have been. We'll look at what the Ravens could do moving forward. I have a couple more scenarios I want to talk about. I know we've been doing kind of something similar to that over the last couple of days, but just what other situations could happen in the event of a Lamar trade or Lamar stays. So plenty to dive into. If we have time in the final segment, we might look at a couple mock drafts on Twitter as well. But thank you for locking it in here on Locked On Ravens. And let's jump in. Let's jump in with Lamar and potentially him getting some wide receiver help, some veteran wide receiver help. Now, obviously, it's kind of crazy for me to be talking about this just so shortly after Lamar requested a trade. But again, just because a trade has been requested does not mean that it's going to happen, and it's not going to happen recently. Like, it's not just because a trade was put out there 3 weeks ago, that request coming on March 2nd, doesn't mean that all of a sudden something's going to come together super quickly and it's all going to get done. As we've seen, it's been out there for 3 weeks and nothing's happened so far. But the reports coming, Josina Anderson, very reliable. She said that she was told that Odell Beckham Jr. arrived at the Biltmore with plans to talk to at least the Ravens. And that comes from Odell, so the source himself. And it's a decent development. It's not like, oh, Odell's coming to Baltimore 100%, but it is a decent development that at least the Ravens are going to talk, or reportedly going to talk to him. And apparently after the meeting concluded, Josina Anderson put out another update, and she spoke to Odell about what the meeting with the Ravens was and connecting with other teams as well. He said the love was there, good meeting, lots of people and teams I bumped into. And then she says eventually the free agent wide receiver will become a big addition to a new team. Now, I've been on record, especially over these last couple of days, saying that the only needle-moving wide receiver still on the market right now, still on the free agent market right now, is Odell Beckham. The other guys just don't move me. I mean, they don't. You had guys, you had other opportunities like an Adam Thielen, a DJ Chark, Juju Smith-Schuster, Alan Lazard, Jacoby Myers, etc. The only free agent guy that would move a needle for me is Odell Beckham Jr. Now, there are other guys potentially available in trades, such as a DeAndre Hopkins or Cortland Sutton, Jerry Jeudy, etc. I know a lot of people also like Mike Evans. I personally don't think he's getting moved, but, you know, the name is there. To me, getting Odell would be a good needle-moving move. I'm not saying it's like the best move they can make. I think I would rather have DeAndre Hopkins. I think I would maybe rather have Cortland Sutton as well, or Jerry Jeudy. But Odell Beckham would be a good move for the Ravens if they were able to get him. Now let's imagine a room. Let's paint a picture of what the room could be for the Ravens if Odell signs. It would be Odell, Rashad Bateman, Devin Duvernay, and you're looking at Nelson Aguilar. And I've seen, Devin Duvernay has a big cap hit. I understand what the cap hit is. I have seen the cap hit. Thank you very much. But I think that for what the Ravens have right now, those top four, Beckham, Bateman, Duvernay, Aguilar, let's just assume Aguilar's the four in this scenario. I think that's fine. It's not the best wide receiver room in the NFL, but I think it gives you a start. And then if you're the Ravens, you can take a couple different paths there where you can add a first-round wide receiver if you want to, like a Jackson Smith and Jigba, Quentin Johnston, Zay Flowers, Jordan Addison, depending on who's there. Or you could wait until the middle rounds. There are still some pretty quality, solid mid-round options. Marvin Mims, Jonathan Mingo. You want to go a bit later, Maryland products, Raheem Jarrett, Dante Demas. There are really quality options at wide receiver, I think, throughout the entirety of this draft. There are some guys kind of in between the Ravens' first and third round picks, unless they trade down. I don't think they're going to have a shot at unless they want to reach a little bit. Guys like Jalen Hyatt, maybe a Cedric Tillman. He could maybe be there at 86, but I think he'll end up going earlier. Guys like Josh Downs, I don't think he's going to be there. So to me, this Odell move, if it were to happen again, there's interest from a lot of different teams. Just because Odell was one of the teams, the Ravens were one of the teams Odell talked to, that's not all of a sudden, Odell's coming. But I think this is the type of move people want to see. And in terms of Odell right now, just to kind of go through kind of his track record here on the field, he's 30 years old right now, about 30 and a half, 5'11", 198. And look, we know what he can do. Over the course of his career, he's had 531 catches, 7,367 yards, and 56 touchdowns. But obviously, recently, it's been the injury history. So this move would have to work out health-wise for the Ravens. And it's interesting because if Lamar stays, if Lamar goes, that's the conversation where some people are saying, why would you sign Odell if Lamar leaves? Well, one, there's no guarantee Lamar leaves, even though it was a request. It was not a demand. He said he requested a trade. I think it was more of we're going to put pressure on the situation because the market isn't what he feels. He felt like it would be type deal instead of an organizational issue. Again, his tweets at least come off to me as it is a money thing and not an organizational thing. So if Lamar were to stay, getting him Odell would be great. I think, this move, this meeting with the Ravens, again, I don't want to read too much into it because, again, it's just a meeting. But the fact that there even was talking, there was a meeting, I think is at least somewhat of a positive step. I don't know how much of a positive step, but it's not a negative step. And for Odell, coming off the ACL, didn't play last year, obviously, but he helped the Rams win the Super Bowl a couple of years ago. He caught a touchdown in that Super Bowl, and he was a key player in that. And I think, again, are you going to get, prime Giants Odell where, he's putting up 12, 13 touchdowns? In his first 3 years, he had 35 touchdowns. That's not what it's going to be. Had 44 touchdowns in 5 years in New York and has had 12 touchdowns in 4 years since. So there has to be a bit of tempering expectations if this move were to happen. But again, we know who Odell is when he is healthy. The fact that he's 30, I think, has scared some people off. That's not a huge issue to me at the moment. Again, I don't think it's the level of a DeAndre Hopkins trade or a Cortland Sutton trade or a Jerry Jeudy trade. But to me, if you end this offseason via the Ravens with Odell and Nelson Aguilar as your two veterans, fine. That's a fine way to approach this offseason. But if it's just Aguilar, that's the issue. And then, you're kind of going down the same path where it's probably a first-round wide receiver, but then what are you doing at cornerback? You can add a position. And Odell signing helps the Ravens at multiple positions. I think for Baltimore, if you were to sign Odell, I think that takes the pressure off of them to take a first-round wide receiver. They could still do it, sure, but I think that gives them the opportunity to go and add a corner, another stud corner. There are all these corners that people love that are first round conversation. I don't think they're touching a Devin Witherspoon or Christian Gonzalez. Those guys are probably going a lot earlier than the Ravens are unless they trade up for them, which they only have 5 picks unless they trade Lamar Jackson. They're not going to have a pick that high. So you're looking at the Deonte Banks, maybe a Joey Porter Jr., although I think he goes before 22. Maybe you're looking at someone I don't know, like a Cam Smith potentially. There are quality options out there that the Ravens could take and put next to Marlon Humphrey and have as a really solid 2-3. And then if you sign a veteran like a Marcus Peters or a Rock Yassin, you have that other option as a solid 2-3. So in terms of Lamar, if you're able to get Lamar this help and Odell and Lamar stays, obviously this is very contingent on Lamar staying. You can't get Lamar help if he's not on the team. So if Odell signs and he has to play with Tyler Huntley or play with a rookie quarterback, so be it. But this is a step where, hey, maybe the Ravens are going out there. And we've heard the scattered reports that Baltimore is not done on the wide receiver market, and they're looking at options like DeAndre Hopkins. So these have been steps, but until something actually happens, we can't read too much into it. We can talk about it, obviously, what you're doing right now, but something I think concrete needs to happen in order for this to be, the Ravens are definitely getting Lamar help. But at this point, it's just speculative. But if the Ravens were to bring back Lamar, get Odell, have this room, maybe add another mid-round wide receiver, I think their offense is in pretty good shape. And look, at this point, Lamar deserves it, right? Because we've seen all the teams go out. I won't list them off because I've done it so many times, but we've seen the teams go out and get their young quarterbacks, big play, big-time wide receivers on their rookie contracts. Lamar's not on his rookie contract anymore, so maybe it kind of hinders the scale of the move you can make. But at the same time, I think Lamar's deserved this. So if he stays, again, it's all contingent on if Lamar stays, because he can't get him help if he's not there. I think Odell Lamar would be a pairing that would be very nice in this Todd Monken offense. And Todd Monken, again, had very high praise for Odell Beckham during his introductory press conference. So coming up on our second segment, we'll talk a bit about Lamar, a bit more about that trade request and what teams have been saying about Lamar over these past 24, 48-ish hours. So be sure to stay tuned. So lots to dive into here on Locked On Ravens. But first, this episode is brought to you by FanDuel, and the tournament is heating up, and there's no better place to get in on the action than FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. That's because right now, FanDuel is giving new customers no sweat first bet up to $1,000. That's up to $1,000 back in bonus bets if your first bet doesn't win. Just go to FanDuel.com/lockedon and sign up today to claim your no sweat first bet. Then you can wager on everything from the money line to point spreads to which team will be cutting down the net. All on an app that's safe, secure, and super easy to use. So don't miss your shot at a no sweat first bet up to $1,000 when you join FanDuel today. Just go to FanDuel.com/lockedon to sign up. Make every moment more of FanDuel. We return here. It's our second segment of Locked On Ravens midweek edition. Kevin Oestreicher still here with you again. Thank you so much for being here, tuning in, making us your first listen here on Locked On Ravens. Be sure to subscribe for free. No money involved. You can subscribe for free. YouTube, audio form, turn notifications on. I appreciate all the support always. But let's continue talking about Lamar Jackson, as we are, locked on Lamar Jackson. We're locked on Ravens and locked on Lamar Jackson at this point. But in terms of what teams have been saying about him, obviously this trade request, I think, was a bombshell for a lot of people. And we were kind of wondering, and there's been so little that's been kind of given out to the public in terms of what Lamar's thinking, what the organization is thinking. Then Lamar just kind of dropped this on everybody and is like, whoa, we're really here. So then the question became, well, all right, if Lamar's requesting a trade, what teams could potentially be interested? We talked about that yesterday on yesterday's show, so be sure to check that out if you haven't already, where we do kind of an in-depth analysis on some of those teams. But now we've kind of heard, the NFL owners meeting going on right now, and with these meetings, you kind of have the opportunity to kind of hear from some of these guys, some of these owners, some of these coaches and general managers about just what the deal is with them. Do they want Lamar? Do they kind of want to stay away from that whole situation? So there were a couple of teams that we talked about yesterday, the Colts, the Patriots, the Falcons. There are others as well, but we did get some quotes from owners and just reports about some of those teams. So let's start with Jim Irsay with the Colts. I think for the Colts, it's interesting because they have the 4th overall pick. It would make a lot of sense from a trade perspective. The Colts obviously need a quarterback. They could still take a guy like Anthony Richardson, CJ Stroud, Bryce Young, Will Levis if they wanted to with that pick. They'll have their choice. But at the same time, Lamar's Lamar, and that's a proven guy. I think their roster is ready to be competitive now. So it would up their competitive status. But with Jim Irsay, he kind of said that the money's not a problem, but instead took issues with the draft capital and compensation, and then ended up saying that, with that money not being a problem, he doesn't like fully guaranteed contracts. So he said, quote, "As an owner, I do not believe in fully guaranteed contracts. I think that a percentage is one thing, but from what I've seen from the NBA and baseball, I don't see it as a positive competitively." So, they haven't ruled out Lamar Jackson, but I think at this point, if Lamar's still pining for that fully guaranteed deal, the Colts aren't going to be a suitor for him because the owner doesn't believe in fully guaranteed money. And that's what it is, where, again, we had Stephen Holder report that teams were looking at these Lamar contract demands, his contract situation, what he wanted, and reported that that was a non-starter for teams right now at the owners meeting. So that gives you a little insight onto how the owners are feeling. And it's not just a money thing for some of these owners too. I mean, Arthur Blank, which I think one of the I think craziest quotes we've had on the situation, saying that the Lamar Jackson situation is very different than Deshaun Watson's from a year ago, and ended up mentioning that there's some concern with Lamar's style and how long it could hold up. And he brought up the games missed over the last 2 years, saying, quote, each game counts in this business. And it's that old tired narrative. Like, look, I'm not denying Lamar's been injured and that I wish he would have been available more over these past 2 years. I'm not denying that. I'm not saying that it's been disappointing. It has been. It's been disappointing. Lamar's been out there for these past couple of years. It's a fact. He's been injured. He's gotten injured these last couple of seasons. But in terms of it's more the play style thing, where let's look back to how Lamar got injured these past 2 years. Let's take it back to 2021, that Browns game, week 14. Was it 14 or 15? One of the two. Lamar drops back to pass. There's pressure in his face. He runs right out of the pocket, like right just outside of the pocket, ends up throwing, and then there's a dirty hit on Lamar. I don't think it was intentional, but it was a late hit, and he hurts the ankle. He's done for the year. That was a passing play. It had nothing to do with play style. It wasn't like he was running the ball and got lit up by someone, or was at the bottom of a pile and got his knee twisted or the ankle twisted or something. It was a passing play. He actually completed the pass to Mark Andrews. Like, he completed the pass, and it was just an unfortunate injury. Then let's go back to last year. He got sacked against the Denver Broncos, week 13. The knee, awkward. Obviously, there was not a lot of information, a lot of mystery surrounding his situation. And John Harbaugh saying, yeah, he'll be back. We expect him to be back. And then that painted a bad picture on Lamar when he didn't come back. All these rumors came out, these false reports. Lamar had to come out and clarified himself. A very ugly situation. But again, it's not like he got lit up on a rushing play. He didn't take a read option or anything. Wasn't running up the middle and got, the leg twisted. He was passing the football. So play style wise, look, I think we can all agree a couple of years ago, more so his rookie season than anything else, which I guess is just a couple of years ago, but essentially it was 5 years ago at this point, which is crazy. It's crazy. Lamar's going into year 6 right now. That's nuts. But regardless, his rookie year, he took a lot of unnecessary hits. He was fighting for that extra yard and would get lit up, and it was an avoidable hit where, what are you taking in that situation? An extra yard on a play you've already picked up 16 yards on, or a very big hit, and, you kind of save the hit for after. So to me, I think that was the real concern his rookie season, because we saw it, but then he cleaned it up. He doesn't do that anymore. Like, he's been a lot smarter with his body. So the play style stuff in terms of, he's taking all these hits. There are a couple of brutal ones he's taken over the course of his career. Don't get me wrong. I'm not saying it's nothing, but in terms of that's the reason, and saying it's different from the Deshaun Watson situation. Yeah, it's different because Lamar hasn't done anything off the field like Deshaun Watson allegedly did. Like, that's what it is. Like, it's just that whole thing where you're comparing this horrible situation in Deshaun Watson, which just is inexcusable, and that's a whole situation with the Browns and the teams pursuing him and whatnot, to a guy in Lamar who is known for being a really good guy both on and off the field. I know this situation has rubbed people the wrong way on him just because of how it's been handled. It hasn't done that to me personally. I think, again, it's been frustrating for a lot of people, and for me included, how both the Ravens and Lamar have handled this. I don't think Lamar is completely an angel in this situation. I don't think the Ravens are completely in the clear in this situation either. I think both sides have been at fault. But for these teams to sit here and say, like the Falcons, who have a ton of cap space right now, to say, yeah, it's just, games count and games matter and the play style, and it's so different from Deshaun Watson, that to me just seems like a cop-out, and there's really something else going on. But at the same time, I think he put it out in the clear, and what a lot of people have been assuming about some of these teams, which is, yeah, well, the play style, which is such an old and tired narrative at this point. Is Lamar a perfect quarterback? No, he's not, right? I think we can all agree nobody's a perfect quarterback. Lamar has his flaws. He has his issues, in terms of what he can do on the field. I get it. So does every quarterback. And Lamar has proven he's gotten better in a lot of different aspects. Still room for improvement. The deep ball accuracy has been an issue the past couple of seasons. And obviously you want more availability, but the availability hasn't been because of the fact that he's taken all these hits. It's been 2 plays where, all of a sudden he's gotten injured here, and it's been that season-ending injury. He's gotten banged up a couple of times too. He gets sick a lot. People Spencer Schultz calls it the bubble guts that he has. But to me, I think that the play style thing is a little bit of a cop-out. But regardless, then you have the Patriots, that whole thing with Meek Mill coming out on Monday about how Meek Mill texted Robert Kraft and said Lamar wants to be a Patriot. And Robert Kraft said that's up to Bill Belichick. Well, apparently the Patriots are not going to pursue Lamar reportedly. So I think we got that answer. So again, it just seems like with all these teams essentially or flat out saying, like the Commanders, who flat out said they're moving forward with Jacoby Brissett and Sam Howell, these teams coming off the board, the list dwindles of these landing spots for Lamar. So coming up in the final segment, we'll continue talking about just what happens for the Ravens if Lamar stays versus if Lamar goes, franchise tag extension, trade packages. So be sure to stay tuned. So lots to dive into on the show. We return here. It's our final segment of Locked On Ravens. Kevin Oestreicher is still talking with you here, talking Lamar Jackson, as it seems like we do every day here. We had an episode on Monday. We did a mock draft Monday. I talked about Lamar for like less than a minute. And then you know what happened next. We did a live stream on everything. So if you want to know when the live streams happen, be sure to turn notifications on. And of course, subscribe. I always plug the subscriptions here, both in YouTube and in audio form for free, by the way. But let's continue talking a little bit about Lamar. Then if we have time, we'll do 1 or 2 mock drafts from Twitter to kind of take off Lamar's situation and have a little break. But now the situations become, there's still many different paths, many different avenues. It's definitely not ideal for the Ravens because I think it has hindered their offseason. But with each team that either comes out, or an owner that comes out and says either we're not interested or we feel this way, and it's very much maybe they're not going to pursue them, it becomes more and more likely that Lamar just returns to the Ravens, even though this trade request happened. A lot of people, again, I talked about it yesterday, talk about like the Deebo Samuel situation with San Francisco, where he requested a trade, was unhappy, wanted a new contract, and then he ends up re-signing in San Francisco, gets an extension, and everything's good. Now, again, those situations are a little different. Quarterback versus wide receiver, it's a little different. The contract that Deebo got versus what Lamar is going to get is going to be different. But regardless, I think this still, just because a trade request has been put in, does not mean something has to happen. Now, if the Ravens were to hold on to Lamar here, let's say he plays on the franchise tag, I don't really see that as a possibility anymore. I floated the idea of the Kirk Cousins route, which is 2 franchise tags, fully guaranteed, hits the market again. This for Lamar, he'd be 28. I just don't know at this point if he's going to do that, and I wouldn't anticipate him doing it. So I've kind of ruled that out for now. So I think it would have to be an extension or just him signing with the Ravens because the market has not been there for him. And again, it's something I've talked about. I talked about it on the radio. I've talked about it on the show here, where there seems to be that no middle ground where Lamar's entrenched in what he wants. The Ravens are entrenched in what they want to give him. And there's no like movement on either side. If I had to guess which side has been, I guess, a bit more willing to move in the direction, I think it may be the Ravens, because I just don't think Lamar's coming down off that fully guaranteed or close to fully guaranteed deal, where I think the Ravens maybe have been willing to throw a little more guaranteed money here or there, but they're not going to go full up to that price. So it seems like there's been very little to no middle ground in this situation. So in terms of an extension, that first-year cap hit, I've outlined it before. You can make that low. Second-year cap hit, same thing. So you're able to maybe make a move for DeAndre Hopkins, bring in some corner depth, some defensive line depth, right? It'd be great to bring Calais Campbell back. I don't think it's happening at this point, but maybe it'd be great to bring a guy like that back. Maybe you can bring in a guy like an Adrian Amos. I don't think that move makes a ton of sense, but maybe they do. And I think for the moves like visiting with Rock Yassin, visiting with Adrian Amos, et cetera, I think those are moves. And I forget who, it was either Spencer Schultz or Cole Jackson, said that it feels like the Ravens are just kicking the tires on these guys to say, hey, if you're not as expensive later on in free agency, if you haven't found a team in a couple months, we'll come calling, and then maybe something gets worked out on a lesser deal. So I actually like that strategy personally, but the Lamar extension opens up so much. Now, if Lamar gets traded, first of all, the offer sheet, the 2 first-round picks, I think bad mismanagement of the situation by the Ravens. Lamar's worth much more than that. Obviously, I think a lot of people are looking at that Russell Wilson package, maybe a little less, maybe a little more, maybe right there, depending on where you view Lamar's value. But 2 first-round picks would be bad mismanagement by the Ravens in terms of getting value for Lamar Jackson and who he is as a player and as a person, honestly. So what you have is maybe if this happens, there are two situations with that though, before the draft and after the draft. If this happens after the draft, an interesting tidbit is that Miami and San Francisco can enter the chase if it's offer sheet money or picks, because they don't have a first round pick right now, which means that they can't be involved because it has to be a pick this year and a pick next year on that offer sheet. So once that draft goes, those picks go to next year, 2024, 2025. Miami and San Francisco have a pick then, so they'd be willing to enter those sweepstakes. So that's an interesting wrinkle that was brought up to me and I think is important. But if it is a trade package and it's like an actual trade package, to me, I think my absolute dream scenario, 2 first-round picks, 2 second-round picks, and Drake London from the Falcons. I don't think it's going to happen. I think it's very unrealistic. The Falcons would part with Drake London and that draft capital. I'd even give up a second-rounder in that situation. I gave up a second-rounder to get a Drake London. That is if I had to pick a young guy to come to Baltimore in a trade, I think Drake London would be that. Obviously, you could look at other guys like Sauce Gardner. It's not happening. It's not happening whatsoever. There's these really good young players. I mean, DJ Moore just got traded in the trade with the Carolina Panthers, where the Panthers got the first round pick. DJ Moore goes to the Bears. So I'm not saying anything's impossible, but for guys like Drake London, Sauce Gardner, I think Drake London's more realistic than Sauce Gardner, because Sauce Gardner was ridiculous last year. Not that Drake London wasn't. Drake London was really good last year, but I just think that, you're looking more at the Wilson package in terms of maybe a first round pick from a couple of years ago that has been solid, not great, not horrible, and then 2 or 3 first round picks, 2 or 3 second/mid round picks, and then maybe 1 or 2 or 3 players. If that's the case, if it happens before the draft and you get a high draft pick, you can take one of these young rookie quarterbacks, you can build around them, hopefully better than they did with Lamar Jackson. Bring in a wider, even if Odell signs with the Ravens and Lamar's not there. If you get a guy like a Bryce Young or a CJ Stroud or an Anthony Richardson or Will Levis, a guy like an Odell, I think that helps. And I think the Ravens can still be competitive with those assets, with a rookie quarterback and with a guy like an Odell. So to me, each way, like I think Lamar still gives them their best shot to win a Super Bowl, 100%. Like that's what I have said, and that's what I'm going to stick by, because you can argue quarterback rankings all you want to, but Joe Burrow's not walking through that door. Mahomes, Jalen Hurts, Josh Allen, etc. And again, those rankings are up to debate. There's no order, but at the same time, I think that there is still a path for the Ravens to be competitive without Lamar, but Lamar just raises the ceiling of the team so much. There is a clear drop off for Lamar leaving the team, and there's no guarantee the Ravens send on a franchise quarterback. With Lamar, he is a franchise quarterback. Even with the improvements he has to make, even with the injury history some people are worried about, he's a franchise quarterback, whether for the Ravens or for somebody else. So I think he gives them the most realistic shot to win a Super Bowl, but there is still a path for the Ravens to be competitive if there is a trade that happens there. Let's dive into a couple of mock drafts from Twitter quickly here to round out the show. We'll first get into one from Eric Sikafouche Jr., who has the Ravens taking Joey Porter Jr., Penn State corner at 22, Rashee Rice, SMU wideout at 86, Corey Bennett, Maryland corner at 125, Cam Jones, Indiana linebacker at 158, and Juice Scruggs, Penn State center at 199. I still love Juice Scruggs, still my favorite name in this draft, by the way. There are a few, but I think Juice Scruggs takes the cake. Joey Porter Jr., a dream scenario for me at 22. I think that's my top overall guy. If the Ravens can trade for a DeAndre Hopkins or sign an Odell or something like that. I don't think he makes it to 22, but I do love that pick. Rashee Rice, I think, is a solid mid-round wide receiver. And again, it depends what the Ravens do wide-out-wise. Because if you bring in an Odell and then take a Rashee Rice, you pair that with Bateman and Duvernay and Aguilar, I like that room. It's not the best room in the NFL, but I think it's a solid room. Corey Bennett, standout combine guy. I think he maybe goes towards the beginning of the 4th round instead of maybe the middle here, like Eric has him going. Cam Jones and Juice Scruggs, 2 solid depth pieces, both a linebacker and center. So I like this one a lot. I think Joey Porter Jr., amazing value. That to me makes it an A, honestly, myself. And then Tusay here says, I traded pick 22 and 124 in exchange for 33 and pick 73. So Josh Downs, the North Carolina wideout's the pick at number 33. Tyreek Stevenson, corner from Miami, is the pick at 73. Andre Carter, the edge from Army, is 86. Raheem Jarrett, wide receiver Maryland at 157. Amaro Jomo, Texas defensive lineman, at 199. Josh Downs is a really intriguing prospect to me. I wouldn't take him at 22. I think Zay Flowers or Jordan Addison will still be there. But if Josh Downs, I think, is like the perfect trade down wide receiver if Zay Flowers is gone. I'd be very happy with Josh Downs at 33. Tyreek Stevenson, very good corner from Miami. Raheem Jarrett, you add on to that Josh Downs pick as well, and getting some defensive line depth in Andre Carter and Moro Ojomo. So solid overall here from Tuesday as well. I like this one a lot, especially with the trade down for Josh Downs. So that's all I have for you here today on Locked On Ravens. Thank you so much for tuning in. When we get back here tomorrow, more Ravens talk, more Lamar Jackson talk on the show. So be sure to subscribe, follow along anywhere you get your podcast, video form, audio form for free. So be sure to stay tuned for that. And I'll see you right back here tomorrow.